Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. I am delighted to have Amanda Hart as my guest. She is a well-known author, a coach, has been providing service over 30 years, helping people overcome challenges and become productive and purposeful. So, Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to invite me.
So, share your journey. Talk a little bit about your growing up and some major influences in your life and how you are doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I guess you can say I had an unconventional upbringing. I am the product of two very high-achieving parents, both of which didn't want children. So I came along as a bit of an accident. My mother was a very high-powered businesswoman. My father was a very clever, self-made interior designer. And both of them were very ambitious, but they didn't factor me in. Their relationship didn't last very long. It was only 9 months. I was passed around to family members up until the age of 3. And then my mother gave me away to my father, who I didn't really know at the age of 3. And that then was my childhood changed because I went from a very loving background, family life, to a very survival-based life. And so my upbringing was pretty challenging, to say the least.
Not everybody has this kind of a life. So as you are moving around, tell me a little bit about, what are some important influences at that time that you can remember?
Well, I guess intuition wasn't optional. It was survival for me.
Mm-hmm.
So from 3 years old, I hadn't really developed my analytical faculty, but instinctively, I knew that I was in danger and I knew I had to learn coping mechanisms. And that was really the greatest influence for me. I learned resilience. I learned a deep understanding how to read the room, to understand about human behavior from a very, very young age. And also how to, sounds a bit bizarre, how to love those that are not lovable, but do that with grace, because it's what they call the 5 F's when it comes to the freeze, flight mechanism. But there's also a friend. And I learned, so I hadn't had any formal training, but I learned how to become the friend of the adults around me so that I could survive. So it was a deeply intuitive, resilient childhood. On the other hand, I also had a very deep understanding of nature because my father had a menagerie of animals, so I spent a lot of time in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned that humor was the best medicine. So I was always the little clown at school and with my friends and making everybody smile because that was my automatic response to it. Make your life happy, whatever you can do, because you just don't know when your last day is going to be here. So I lived in survival mode, but I was a very happy child, even though I was going through some traumatic experiences.
I just want to kind of repeat for our listeners, how do you show up to love the unlovable?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, prior to moving into that house, my grandparents, who had been really my main carers, were incredibly unconditionally loving mentors for me. They were like my parents. So I already had this understanding that love means safety, kindness, and all the other things that come with it. So I guess my goal was to stay alive. And I knew that people deep down, I did see glimmers of hope, of kindness at times. So I felt that if I learned to love these human beings, it was damage limitation, but also it may one day turn them around and help them to see what I wanted them to see, which was that I was a lovable child. So I also realized that the deep love that I had with the animals that we had and also for nature, there had to be at the root of human beings some element of love that keeps us alive. It helps us to find our purpose. It helps us to find what we're here for. It helps us to connect and bond. So I guess I was living my purpose when I was a child before I even knew that I had a purpose to live, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense, right? And I mean, in some ways, this notion of love becomes unconditional, whereas every other emotion has some other thing attached to it. So I'm so glad that you actually talked a little bit about that. So you grew up with your father. Talk a little bit about that growing up, and then, where did you go to school, and what did you study, and how did you decide this is the career you wanted to make?
So my father excelled in his business. He was an icon. He was known very much so in the Mayfair, Park Lane, Kensington areas. He had no end of clients. So it was inevitable that I would have to follow in my father's footsteps. He was a very strong influencer. He was a very highly accomplished entrepreneur, and there was no question about it. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps. So I was conditioned to go on to university and go into that profession, which was not what I wanted to do, but that was where I was heading. But my father suddenly died during the most crucial time of my childhood, and that was when I was about 16, 17. He became ill. So that there was uncertainty at home. And by the time I was 17, I was homeless. It was my chance to escape because I could never stay in the house with his wife. So I was homeless and I had no means to support myself. I had no direction. So I was set on a very different path. And I guess at first I clambered from trying to do college at night, working any jobs that I could during the day, trying to fumble through life and work out what had just happened to me through my childhood and where I was heading. And it wasn't until I guess I was early 20s that I started working in a customer service role that I realized I wanted to work with people. And that's where I started understanding that was what I was destined to do.
And you did go into the design space for a little bit, or not at all?
Not at all, no. I went to work a lot with my father. I was very creative, very artistic. I wanted to write, but he told me that, you can't make money writing silly stories. So that was where I was going.
So you go through this journey and you are now a coach and you've been doing this for a long time. So just talk a little bit about that journey and why what you're doing is important.
So I fell into this because I recognized that as an adult, I was attracting negative situations and negative people. And that was the upshot of childhood. You've got that conditioning. It's ingrained in the subconscious. So for personal reasons, I wanted to find out, well, what is it that's going on in me? How can I change that? And because I had been very aware as a child, it was natural that I gravitated to more intuitive-based research and holistic research because I felt that I was too sensitive for the ordinary world. There was too much depth to me. So I found that spirituality was a way to explore who I was. As I started to change, people started to witness that and then asked me if I could help them. So inevitably, I started training in holistics first and foremost. And my deep intuitive faculty helped me to attract people that just wanted, to go through the change themselves. Then I was nominated to go on television. I was nominated to become a radio presenter. I just attracted the right people at the right time. And I never asked for any of it. I just kept, when you live through that kind of chaos, what's left is revealed to you and you recognize that that's your purpose. And I knew in my heart that it didn't matter how much I fought it, I would continually attract the right people that would help me forge my way. And that's, kind of how it happened, really. There was no great plan.
Again, for our listeners, many of us try and chart a very systematic approach to our career. But in many cases, career is really not that important. How you show up and what you offer becomes important. And recognizing that, to me, is really your inner strength and your purpose that allows you to do that. And Amanda has kind of discovered that through her journey by being open to influences. So talk a little bit about, your current practice and how you're doing and where are some opportunities that you see.
The more I explore this and the more people approach me, the more I recognize that there was a whole area that I still hadn't explored. And I think because I went through a lot of crisis through adulthood, and finding solutions to it, I was attracting more and more people and opportunities to help me to discover more. So I tried to go into orthodox work, still seeing clients. I had a beautiful shop selling secondhand designer clothes to try and help with the crisis with our consuming of clothing. I was running PR for the local businesses. I had a real talent to help people on different levels. But the draw was always back to my work. And I had another crash. So I've had some serious health crashes during my life. And I think that's because of the trauma to the head. And I lost everything. And the only thing I had left was a part-written book, which was not destined to be published. It was actually for my children. But when I was a radio presenter for My Spirit Radio, the director had asked me to write my memoir. And she said to me at that time, look, that's the only answer that you have left in the world. And that's opened doors for me. I got it published. I managed to keep a roof over our head. We'd lost our house and everything we owned, but I was able to protect my children. And that opened a whole new arena to me. I was then recognized in the coercive control arena. I had clients that wanted to work with me and to open up my dialogue, really, or my narrative as to how we could actually make a difference from a holistic spiritual perspective, because we had a real crisis here in the UK. And so that's what led me to become an ambassador for See Through MPD, which is the philanthropist Andrew Dixon's brainchild. And I had this notion 10 years ago that we had a real solution to helping with this crisis, which is getting worse. But we need to apply a more holistic spiritual element to it. And back 10 years ago, I was told I was too woo-woo, and I had threats to close my book down and all sorts because the industry wasn't ready to listen to this. Now we're in real crisis financially and socially. People are listening, and now I've got the backing of a philanthropist who is now backing my concept. And we've got a part-filmed film ready to tour around the UK to help engage in those conversations and create hubs throughout the UK. So, from somebody who really has had no formal training whatsoever, other than in the field that I'm in, and having had no direction, I followed my heart the whole way. And that's what I do for my clients. I help them to open up and discover, well, what is it that your heart is really telling you to do? And that's how, really, intrinsically, we make a better world to live in.
That's very interesting, right? So you kind of wanted to be a writer. Your father basically dissuaded you from being a writer, but yet you became a best-selling author of several books.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's basically come about because you followed your heart. The first one helped to get back onto your feet. But talk a little bit about the message that you're trying to spread.
I think we're so disconnected now, especially because of social media and the way the world has fed up with technology. And the more disconnected we become, the less we are aware of ourselves as human beings. And if we don't bring our whole self into business, into relationships, into daily life, then only part of us is showing up. And that's how we create discord. So my message when I'm working with my clients, when it's ingrained in my books, it's ingrained in my teachings, is all about showing up as our whole self. And often that's not pretty. And that's not exactly how people have wanted to present themselves because they've been conditioned or they feel that there's a certain way that they have to run their business or their relationships. But that's why we have conditions like narcissism and why we have wars, because we're so disconnected as humanity. It's about reinstilling the element of community again. And that's why the movement that I'm involved in now is actually about threading all the communities back together again. It's about engaging real philanthropic tithing to come into play in communities to give back so that we can actually start building stronger relationships within our own neighborhood, our own families, our own pods.
One of the things that I always talked about is showing up with our full self, which is what you had just talked about. And that showing up with authenticity. Yet there is enormous pressure. And there are people who actually written about, why you should not show up with your authentic self in the workplace. And I find that to be incredibly challenging, where we are actually stifling people. So talk a little bit about how you've seen that and what is your message for people that should show up with their whole self. And what does that mean? And how do you overcome some of these automatic negative thoughts people have about themselves And how do they overcome that?
I guess it works to a certain degree, but then it's not sustainable because, you know what it's like when you walk into a room and you meet somebody for the first time. The first few seconds you connect with that person and you pretty much summarize what that person means to you, how you feel about that person. When we're talking to someone, only about 7% of what's really being communicated is actually in what we're saying. Everything else is body language, tonality. And we really do pick up on what's true in that person. So if we want really meaningful, sustainable relationships and to thrive, we need to be more aligned with our true self. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. This is why things break down in the end.
So talk a little bit about the film that you're doing to our listeners so that they can get a better sense of what you're trying to achieve and how they might also become part of it.
So the film idea actually came about 10 years ago when I had quite a bit of attention over my book. And I got offered all sorts of film contracts and people who, convert it into a screenplay. And that's all very well and good. And it could have given me a sustainable income, but it wasn't the reason why I wrote it. People wanted to sort of hash it into something which would have been something that it's not meant to be. So I waited, but I did have somebody who was very interested in doing something that was going to touch the hearts of people to help with something that was going to create real change. And so I've had a producer for the last 10 years who's been there working with me. And recently I spoke to Viscount David Reed, who is very connected to, community building here. And he said, your idea needs to get out there. You will get the funding. So it all came about last year. We put the project together. We attracted people like Lynette Jackson-Edwards, who used to tour Robbie Williams and Elton John and people like that, to help take this globally out to a global audience. And we've really got a fantastic team of people. It's going to be toured around the UK in independent cinemas with questions and answers with panel experts. And there'll be events run alongside. And that's to bring conversations into local communities. That then gets people to talk on a greater scale, which is at the moment we're firefighting here in the UK with just the resources that we have. We don't have the resources to keep on responding to what's going on with this crisis. However, we can actually help people to help themselves, but we need to create awareness that they actually have more power than they realize. And then the resources can support that process. So it is a holistic approach. And my idea is not something that's going to cost. It's about tithing, which then allows local entrepreneurs, people who are philanthropists to get involved as well. So eventually, when we get the film out there, people can come and watch the film, people can engage in conversations, and we'll start to promote the events as well. So we start creating what we call the Hub of Healing Hearts, which is something that we're going to have in each community.
I love the Hub of Healing Hearts, which is, I think, that just such a way to bring people together.
Yes.
Because, if I may just suggest, I hope that the healing then leads to thriving.
Yes.
And that at the end of the day, our healed communities should actually become thriving communities. So, this is such a fantastic message. As we try and close out, share a little bit about why purpose is important for you and how you've obviously shared some of it, but maybe it could become a reframing of how purpose has been so important for your life and your journey.
I think ultimately purpose has kept me alive. Purpose has kept me feeling that I can make a difference because, my childhood, my young adulthood, even up to my mid-50s was not for nothing. So it's important for me to be able to leave a legacy. I think we all need to make this a better world to live in. And we can't just, rent a space and then trick off this mortal coil. We need to be able to do something for the next generation. So for me, it's incredibly important that I continue with this work until, for my children, for my children's children and generations to come, because that's how we make this a better world. So purpose has been ingrained in absolutely everything I do, whether it's with raising children, whether it's with my friends, whether it's with my community and my clients. I will always infuse purpose into everything I do.
Let's end by you sharing your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you want our listeners to emulate.
Yeah, I wrote this the other day, actually. I wrote, gold fades, calm endures. Nervous system is incredibly important to us. Steady nervous system will take you further than ambition ever could. And that's so important because we live in a world which is so infused with attraction, goals, ambition. But if we hold ourselves with a steady heart, we can always get further than we realize.
That's such a fantastic message to end on. Hold yourself with a steady heart, and that will open up avenues and drive you forward, give you momentum. Amanda, thank you so very much for being on the podcast. Again, to our listeners, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. This has been something that Amanda intuitively discovered at a very, very young age. We hope that you all will continue on this journey. And thank you for listening. Amanda, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me.